Don't be deceived. That's the message of what I want to talk to you about today. It's also the message from the book of James. Don't be deceived. If we look at James 1:26, I could put in the words, don't be deceived, and then James picks up, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Don't be deceived into thinking that because things are hard, somehow you're doing something wrong. As James continues, we have to allow perseverance to finish its work. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. That's James 1:26. I'd like to point out that this verse, it also relates to what you post on social media and to what you send in text messages. Have you ever met a co-worker or a friend who is a really nice person, and then you meet their children who are really badly behaved? And you look at them and you're wondering, how can you possibly be related to each other? Don't be deceived. Because as Christians, we believe that one day we will give an account for every word, every text message, social media post, everything that we've ever done. And it's really hard to believe that you love God if you don't love the other members of God's family. Don't be deceived. You see, this whole book of James, it is about helping us walk this simple gospel in everyday life. And as I'm winding down, I want to leave you with two really simple things that we can do to help us in our walk, help us interpret and live out what James is telling us to do. The first is really simple. Go to church. Now, there's no verse in the book of James that tells us that we're supposed to go to church, but you only have to drive down the 101 to realize that every person has their own interpretation of what the speed limit is. Everyone has their own interpretation of how to drive a car. And if you read the book of James without it being properly interpreted, you might keep such a strong bridle on your tongue that you never say anything. And that is not what the gospel teaches us to do. And when we read one verse which is really hard-hitting, we need to understand that within the whole counsel of Scripture. And I'm not saying that if you come to Evident Life Church, you're going to become some super Christian Jedi who knows everything. But you will hear sound biblical teaching that's properly interpreted. And so come to church. Expose yourself to the full counsel of Scripture. Not so that you can be smarter than everyone else, but when you see James telling us to be careful about how we speak, that you know that you're still supposed to speak up. You're still supposed to speak out in defense of what the gospel teaches. The second thing that I'd like to say is in James chapter 1, verse 22, we're called to be doers of the word, not just hearers. We're not supposed to become these Christian intellectuals. And my wife and I, we recently had an experience where we moved into a new house. And we went and, because we were new, we went and knocked on the doors of our neighbour. All we did was we knocked on the door, we said, "Hi, we're new." We showed them where we live. And the conversation might have lasted a minute or two. And then a few months later, we invited, I think it was 9 houses we invited to come over to our house. And because it was still COVID, we just brought the fire pit out onto the front driveway and we just talked on the front driveway. Everyone was socially distanced. There was no problem with that. Now, I said we invited 9 people or 9 houses. Only 3 of them actually came, but those 3 families had never met each other. And what I'm trying to say by this is all we did was try to be doers of the word. And it hasn't led to anything in particular. It It hasn't led to salvations, but it's leading to relationship. And I want to encourage you to get to know the people around you, because it's really hard to be a Christian witness if people don't see you. And so today I just pray that you would commit yourself to your local church and that you would be a doer of the word, so that you're not deceived in what you believe and you're not deceived in how you act.